"Sir, you need to move to coach. This seat isn't for people like you." The flight attendant's smile never wavered as she blocked Marcus Williams from his paid first-class seat. Marcus stood in the aisle of Flight 447, boarding pass 1, a clutched in his manicured hand. His tailored charcoal suit cost more than most people's monthly salary. The Hermes briefcase at his feet contained documents that could reshape entire industries. Yet Jessica, the blonde flight attendant, treated him like a criminal. "There must be some mistake with your ticket," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Several nodded approvingly. One elderly woman whispered, "Finally, someone's checking." Marcus checked his Patek Philippe watch. Then his phone buzzed with an urgent message. These black stories happen daily in corporate America. Real-life stories that become touching stories of quiet revolution. Life stories that change everything. Marcus smiled slightly. "Interesting timing," he murmured. "Have you ever been judged by your appearance before anyone discovered your true power?" What Marcus did next grounded an entire airline. 2:47 p.m., 13 minutes to departure. Marcus Williams had flown first class 847 times in the past 5 years. He knew every protocol, every courtesy, every unwritten rule of premium air travel. What he'd never experienced was being questioned about his right to occupy a seat he'd legally purchased. Jessica's supervisor appeared within seconds, as if summoned by some invisible signal. Mark Thompson, a thin man with prematurely gray hair, approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to handling situations. "What seems to be the problem here?" Mark asked, not bothering to make eye contact with Marcus. "This gentleman claims he belongs in 1A, Jessica explained, her voice carrying just enough volume to ensure the surrounding passengers could follow the drama. "But you know how these mix-ups happen." Mark nodded knowingly. He'd seen this before, or so his expression suggested. Without asking for identification, without examining the boarding pass still in Marcus's hand, he made his assessment. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside so we can resolve this ticket issue," Mark said, crossing his arms across his chest. The gesture was deliberate, creating a physical barrier between Marcus and his assigned seat. Behind them, the cabin filled with murmurs of approval. A middle-aged businessman in 2B looked up from his Wall Street Journal. "About time someone actually checked," he muttered to his wife, who nodded vigorously. In seat 3A, Sarah Chen had been idly scrolling through Instagram when the commotion began. As a travel blogger with 45,000 followers, she recognized good content when she saw it. She discreetly opened her camera app and began recording. "Flight drama unfolding right now," she whispered to her phone. "This is wild." Marcus remained perfectly still, his briefcase at his feet, his expression unreadable. His phone buzzed constantly text messages, emails, calendar reminders. The digital displays showed meeting notifications from Board of Directors, Legal Team, and Executive Committee. "I have a confirmed seat," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady. "First class, 1A, I'd like to board now." Jessica laughed at a sharp, artificial sound. "Sir, I think there's been some confusion about your ticket class. Coach is perfectly comfortable, and there are still seats available." The gate agent's computer screen displayed Marcus's booking details clearly. "First class, seat 1A, confirmed." But neither Jessica nor Mark bothered to look at their own system. Instead, Mark signaled to airport security with a subtle wave. 2 officers began walking toward the gate, their radios crackling with routine chatter. "You have 2 choices," Mark announced, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who believed he held all the power. "Move voluntarily to your correct seat, or security will escort you there." The digital departure board overhead flickered. "Flight 447, boarding, 10 minutes to departure." Marcus glanced at his watch again. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth, not of amusement, but of calculation. His phone displayed 17 missed calls, all from numbers that would have made Mark's face go pale if he'd bothered to notice. 8 minutes, Marcus said softly, speaking more to himself than to anyone else. Sarah's Instagram live stream was gaining viewers rapidly. The viewer count climbed 89, 156, 203. The comments were flying. "This is discrimination. Good for the flight crew. Sue them." Finally, someone checking fake tickets. The hashtag number Flightgate was already trending in the local area. From his briefcase, a business card had fallen during the commotion. It lay face down on the aircraft floor, its embossed lettering invisible to the growing crowd of onlookers. Marcus made no move to retrieve it. "Sir, our security team is approaching," Jessica said with satisfaction. "Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact labeled simply "Emergency Protocol." His thumb hovered over the call button. "Before this goes any further," he said, his voice still eerily calm, "I should probably mention something." Mark scoffed. "What's that?" "You have 7 minutes to departure. Once this plane pushes back from the gate, several things become irreversible." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm informing you." Marcus's finger moved toward the call button. "Time has a way of running out faster than people realize." The elderly woman in 4C leaned forward to get a better view. "Someone should call the real police," she announced loudly. "This man is clearly disturbed." Security officers were now 30 feet away, their hands already moving toward restraints. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight crew, prepare for departure. All passengers should be seated." Marcus looked at his phone one more time. The screen showed a text message from Williams Industries boardroom. "Standing by for your signal." 6 minutes, he said, almost to himself. Mark stepped closer, his patience clearly exhausted. "Sir, you're going to comply right now, or you're going to be removed from this aircraft. Which is it going to be?" Marcus finally looked up from his phone, making direct eye contact with Mark for the first time. His expression was perfectly serene. "That," he said quietly, "depends entirely on what happens in the next 5 minutes. 2:52 p.m., 8 minutes to departure." Security Chief David Rodriguez had worked airport security for 12 years. He'd handled everything from drunk passengers to suspected terrorists. But something about this situation felt different as he approached Gate 23. The crowd had grown. Passengers from nearby gates had wandered over, drawn by the commotion and the obvious drama unfolding. Cell phones were everywhere, recording from multiple angles. "What's the situation?" Rodriguez asked Mark, his hand instinctively resting on his radio. "Passenger refusing to comply with seating instructions," Mark replied, his voice carrying the weight of assumed authority. "Claims he has a first-class ticket but won't show proper identification." Rodriguez looked at Marcus, taking in the expensive suit, the confident posture, the complete lack of agitation despite being surrounded by hostile faces. In his experience, guilty people showed stress. This man looked like he was waiting for something. "Sir, I need you to cooperate with the airline staff," Rodriguez said, pulling out plastic zip-tie restraints. "We can do this easy, or we can do this hard." Sarah's Instagram Live had exploded. The viewer count hit 2,847 and was climbing rapidly. Comments flooded the screen faster than she could read them. "This is racial profiling. Record everything. Where's this happening? What airline? Sue them into the ground." The hashtag number flight discrimination was trending nationally now. Major news outlets were picking up the story in real time. Sarah's notifications were going crazy with reshares and mentions. "Oh my God, guys," she whispered to her phone. "This is getting insane. The security chief just pulled out handcuffs." Marcus remained perfectly still, watching the chaos unfold around him with an almost detached curiosity. His phone continued to buzz with notifications, but he ignored them all except for one EA calendar reminder that flashed briefly on his screen. "Board meeting, emergency session, 3:15 p.m. "Sir, you're making everyone uncomfortable," Jessica announced, loud enough for her voice to carry throughout the gate area. "Other passengers have expressed concerns about your behavior." This was a lie, but it sounded official enough that several passengers nodded along. The businessman in seat 2B had returned to his newspaper, but his wife was recording with her phone from the aircraft doorway. "He's been nothing but polite," said a voice from the crowd. A young black woman in her 20s had stepped forward. "I've been watching this whole thing. He hasn't raised his voice once." "Ma'am, please return to your seat," Mark said dismissively. "This doesn't concern you." "Discrimination concerns everyone," she replied firmly, not moving. Rodriguez stepped closer to Marcus, the zip ties clearly visible in his hands. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to cooperate voluntarily. After that, we'll do this the hard way." Marcus finally looked up from his phone. "Before you proceed, I need to make one call. It's urgent." "No more delays," Rodriguez snapped. "You've had plenty of time to—" "It's a business call," Marcus interrupted gently. "Time sensitive. Literally." Without waiting for permission, he speed-dialed a number. The call connected immediately. "Emergency protocol," Marcus said quietly into the phone. "Flight 447, Gate 23, Meridian Airlines. Authorization code Delta 77. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Confirmed, sir. Initiating now." Rodriguez lunged forward to grab the phone, but Marcus had already ended the call and was slipping the device back into his pocket. "What did you just do?" Mark demanded. Marcus raised his hands slowly, palms open. "I made a phone call. That's still legal, isn't it?" "You should check your computer systems," Marcus added casually. "Something might have changed." Jessica was already moving toward the gate computer, but Mark waved her off. "Don't fall for his games. He's just trying to buy time." 2:55 p.m., 5 minutes to departure. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom again. "This is Captain Morrison. We're showing a slight delay in our departure. Flight crew, please stand by for further instructions." Rodriguez had the zip ties out now, approaching Marcus with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. "Sir, turn around and put your hands behind your back." Marcus complied without resistance, his movements calm and deliberate. As Rodriguez reached for his wrists, Sarah's live stream viewer count hit 5,000. "This is unbelievable," she whispered to her audience. "They're actually arresting him for sitting in his own seat." The young woman who had spoken up earlier pulled out her own phone and began recording. Others followed suit. The gate area was now a forest of raised phones, all capturing the scene from different angles. "I want everyone to see this," she announced loudly. "This is what discrimination looks like in 2024. Rodriguez paused, suddenly aware of how this might appear to the dozens of cameras trained on him. In the social media age, even justified arrests could become public relations nightmares. "Ma'am, please step back," he said, but his voice had lost some of its authority. Marcus turned slightly, addressing the crowd for the first time. "I appreciate everyone's concern, but I think this situation is about to resolve itself." "What's that supposed to mean?" Mark asked, irritation clear in his voice. Marcus checked his watch one more time. 3 minutes. As if on cue, the gate computer screen flickered. Jessica, who had been monitoring the boarding process, suddenly straightened up. Her expression changed from smug satisfaction to confusion. "Mark," she said, her voice suddenly uncertain, "you need to see this." The departure board overhead began flashing. "Flight 447, delay, gate hold." Captain Morrison's voice returned to the intercom, but this time he sounded confused. "Gate 23, this is Captain Morrison. Tower is reporting some kind of administrative hold on our departure clearance. Can you confirm?" Rodriguez loosened his grip on the zip ties. Something was happening, something beyond his understanding. At the top of the screen, in bold red letters, a message flashed. "Passenger 1, A, Marcus Williams, CEO authorization required for any actions." Below that, data that made Mark's hands tremble. Williams Industries, primary shareholder. Meridian Airlines parent company. Ownership stake, 34.7%. Board position, executive chairman. Authority level, absolute. Marcus slowly lowered his hands, no longer treating this as an arrest situation. Rodriguez had stepped back entirely, his radio squawking with urgent messages from supervisors who were just beginning to understand the magnitude of what was happening. "I tried to tell you," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying easily through the sudden silence that had fallen over the gate area. Time was running out. He reached into his jacket pocket, slowly, deliberately, and produced his identification. Not a driver's license or passport, but a corporate ID badge that read, "Marcus Williams, CEO, Williams Industries," along with a photo and a security chip that glittered under the gate area's fluorescent lighting. Sarah's viewer count had exploded past 15,000. Her whispered commentary could barely keep up with what she was witnessing. "Oh my God, you guys. Oh my God, this is not what any of us expected." Jessica's tablet was now displaying a cascade of emergency notifications. Company-wide alerts were flooding in. "CEO Marcus Williams on site, all staff alert. Emergency board meeting activated. Discrimination incident protocol initiated. Legal team standing by." The business card that had fallen from Marcus's briefcase earlier was still on the floor. A passenger bent to pick it up, then froze as he read it aloud. "Marcus Williams, Chief Executive Officer, Williams Industries, Board Chairman, Meridian Holdings Group." The elderly woman in 4C, who had been so vocal about calling real police, was now staring at Marcus with growing recognition. "Williams Industries," she murmured. That's the company that owns half the airlines in this country." Mark was frantically scrolling through his computer system, trying to understand what he was seeing. Corporate ownership data that gate agents never accessed was now displayed prominently. Meridian Airlines. Parent company, Meridian Holdings Group. Primary investor, Williams Industries, 34.7% controlling stake. Secondary investors, various, 65.3% combined. CEO authority, Marcus Williams, ultimate operational control. Rodriguez's supervisor was now speaking directly to him through his radio. "Chief Rodriguez, you are to provide full assistance to Mr. Williams immediately. This is coming from the airport director. Do not take any enforcement action." Marcus pulled out his phone and checked a message that had just arrived. The screen was visible to nearby passengers. "Williams Industries boardroom, emergency session activated, legal team standing by, stock impact monitoring initiated." "The thing about time," Marcus said, addressing the crowd that had gathered, "is that it reveals everything eventually. 30 seconds ago, I was just another passenger you could push around. Now?" He gestured toward the computer screens, the canceled flight displays, the chaos of radio chatter and confused airline staff. "Now you understand who actually owns this plane." Sarah's live stream had become a phenomenon. Comments were flooding in from viewers around the world. "Holy plot twist. This is better than any movie. Sue them all. I can't believe this is real." The hashtag number CEOR Revenge was trending globally now, with major news networks picking up the story. CNN, Fox, and MSNBC were all preparing breaking news segments. Mark finally found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "Mr. Williams, we didn't know, if we had realized." "That's the problem," Marcus interrupted gently. "You didn't bother to know. You saw what you wanted to see, assumed what you wanted to assume, and acted accordingly." He paused, checking his watch. "My board meeting starts in 12 minutes. The legal team is already reviewing everything that happened here, frame by frame, thanks to..." He nodded toward Sarah, who was still live streaming. "Comprehensive documentation." Jessica had gone completely pale. Her tablet was showing her employment record, her performance reviews, and a flashing message. "Disciplinary review initiated. Report to regional supervisor immediately." "But here's what you really need to understand," Marcus continued, his voice still eerily calm. "This isn't just my plane. It's not just my airline. The company I built owns substantial stakes in 17 major airlines, 43 airports, and the largest pilot training facility in North America." He pulled up another screen on his phone, showing stock ticker symbols and real-time market data. Meridian Holdings, MRD, down 3.2% in the last hour. Williams Industries, WIL, down 1.8%. Total market cap impact, $847 million. Every minute this incident trends on social media costs shareholders money. Every news report costs jobs. Every lawsuit costs futures. Rodriguez was receiving another radio message. This time, his supervisor's voice was clearly audible. Airport director is requesting immediate meeting with Mr. Williams. Roll out red carpet protocol. This is not a drill. The young woman who had defended Marcus earlier was recording everything on her phone. This is incredible, she said, loud enough for her own video to pick up. David versus Goliath, except David was Goliath all along. Marcus looked around the gate area, taking in the faces of passengers, airline staff, and security personnel who had treated him like a criminal just minutes before. His expression remained calm, almost compassionate. "There's one more thing you should probably know," he said, his voice carrying easily through the stunned silence. Mark, Jessica, and Rodriguez all leaned forward slightly, dreading what they were about to hear. Marcus smiled for the first time since boarding began. Not a cruel smile, but the patient expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "This flight, Flight 447, it's not just any flight." He paused, letting the tension build. "It's my private charter. I own this specific aircraft. The crew works for me directly, and I was flying to a board meeting where we're deciding the future of employment policies for 47,000 airline industry workers." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Sarah had stopped whispering commentary to her live stream, her mouth hanging open in shock. Marcus checked his phone one more time. 11 minutes until my board meeting. The question now isn't whether I'll press charges or file lawsuits. The question is whether anyone involved in this incident will still have jobs by dinner time. He looked directly at Jessica, then Mark, then Rodriguez. "And that decision gets made in exactly 10 minutes. 3:05 p.m., VIP conference room, Terminal C." Within 7 minutes, the airport's executive conference room had been transformed into an emergency boardroom. Marcus sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his laptop open to multiple screens, showing real-time financial data, legal documents, and live-stream footage that was still trending globally. Regional Vice President Patricia Hayes had arrived via emergency helicopter from downtown, her usual composure shattered by the magnitude of the crisis. Behind her stood the airline's head of legal affairs, a crisis management specialist, and 3 other executives whose careers were now hanging by threads. Jessica and Mark sat at the opposite end of the table, flanked by union representatives who had been hastily summoned. Security Chief Rodriguez stood near the door, no longer acting as law enforcement but as a potential defendant. Sarah was still live streaming from the hallway outside, her viewer count having peaked at 78,000. Major news networks were now running the story live, with CNN's breaking news banner reading, "Airline CEO discriminated against on his own flight." "Let's establish the facts," Marcus began, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were made daily. "At 2:47 p.m., I attempted to board Flight 447 using a legally purchased first-class ticket. I was denied boarding based solely on my appearance." He clicked his laptop, and the wall-mounted monitor displayed a precise timeline. Financial impact, real-time data. Stock price decline. Meridian Holdings down 4.1%, $127 million market cap loss. Williams Industries down 2.3%, $89 million impact. Social media reach, 2.3 million mentions in 47 minutes. Negative sentiment, 84% of tracked mentions. "The immediate cost of this incident," Marcus continued, "is $216 million in combined market cap losses. That's in the first hour." Patricia Hayes spoke for the first time, her voice strained. "Mr. Williams, we sincerely apologize for this unfortunate misunderstanding. If we had known—" "But you didn't know," Marcus interrupted calmly, "and that's precisely the problem. Your staff operates under assumptions that have now cost shareholders over $200 million. He pulled up another screen. Legal precedent data. Legal exposure analysis. Civil Rights Act violations. $2 minus 15 million potential damages. Corporate discrimination liability. $5 minus 25 million range. Punitive damages precedent. 3x compensatory awards. Class action potential. If systemic discrimination proven. Federal transportation discrimination statutes. Criminal penalties possible. However, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair, I'm not interested in lawsuits. I'm interested in systematic change. The head of legal affairs, Michael Chen, leaned forward nervously. What kind of change are you proposing, Mr. Williams? Marcus's presentation clicked to the next slide. Option analysis. Option 1, legal warfare. Immediate termination of all involved staff. Federal discrimination lawsuit filing. SEC investigation request for corporate culture. Public shareholder lawsuit. Support. Congressional testimony on airline discrimination. Estimated company cost. $47 minus 89 million, 18-month timeline. Option 2, systematic reform. Immediate policy implementation. Comprehensive bias training overhaul. Third-party monitoring systems. Public accountability measures. Industry leadership on discrimination prevention. Estimated cost, $12 minus 18 million, 6-month timeline. I'm offering option 2, Marcus said simply. But the window for accepting these terms closes in exactly 4 minutes. Patricia's hands were visibly shaking as she reviewed the terms Marcus was proposing. Immediate requirements. Termination of Jessica Morrison, flight attendant, effective immediately. Suspension without pay, Mark Thompson, supervisor, 30 days, mandatory bias training. Transfer and retraining, David Rodriguez, security, new position, discrimination, awareness, certification. Public apology from airline CEO within 48 hours. $500,000 donation to civil rights organizations. 30-day implementation. Dignity First Protocol. Zero tolerance discrimination policy. AI-powered bias detection system for all customer interactions. Anonymous reporting system with QR codes in every seat. Monthly third-party bias audits. Quarterly public reports on discrimination prevention. 60-day requirements. 40-hour unconscious bias certification for all customer-facing staff. Cultural competency training modules. Customer dignity protocols. Implementation. Executive diversity and inclusion officer appointment. Marcus nodded acknowledgement but kept his eyes on Patricia Hayes, who was the only person in the room with authority to accept the terms. 30 seconds. Patricia looked up from her phone, where she'd received final authorization from the board. Mr. Williams, Meridian Airlines accepts all your terms. We'll implement every requirement you've outlined. Marcus closed his laptop with a quiet click. Miss Morrison, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. Mr. Thompson, you're suspended for 30 days and will report for bias training Monday morning. Mr. Rodriguez, you'll be transferred to cargo operations and enrolled in sensitivity training. He stood up from his chair, straightening his tie. Miss Hayes, I expect the CEO's public apology by tomorrow at noon. The $500,000 donation should be announced simultaneously. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Miss Hayes, Flight 447 will depart in exactly 90 minutes with a new crew. I have a board meeting in Chicago that I cannot miss. Patricia nodded rapidly. Of course, Mr. Williams. We'll have your aircraft ready immediately. As Marcus reached the door, he turned back one final time. The most expensive lessons are the ones that could have been avoided with simple human decency. Today's lesson cost you $216 million in market value, 3 careers, and your company's reputation. He opened the door to find Sarah still live streaming in the hallway. She looked up at him with a mixture of awe and respect. Any final comments for the 80,000 people watching? She asked. Marcus paused, considering. Change doesn't happen because people are forced to change. It happens because the cost of staying the same becomes too high. He walked away, leaving behind a conference room full of people whose world had been permanently altered by 30 minutes of consequences they never saw coming. 48 hours later, Meridian Airlines CEO Robert Martinez stood behind the podium at corporate headquarters, facing a room packed with reporters, civil rights leaders, and industry analysts. The press conference was being live-streamed across multiple platforms, with over 400,000 viewers watching in real time. 48 hours ago, one of our valued customers experienced treatment that falls far below our standards and values. Martinez began, reading from a carefully prepared statement. Marcus Williams, CEO of Williams Industries, was subjected to discrimination that has no place in our industry or our society. The apology was comprehensive, specific, and humble, exactly what Marcus's legal team had drafted. But more importantly, it was accompanied by immediate action. Behind Martinez, a large screen displayed the new Dignity First protocol that was already being implemented across all Meridian Airlines operations. Phase 1. Immediate implementation. Completed. Zero tolerance discrimination policy, active, system-wide. Anonymous reporting QR codes installed in every seat. Real-time bias detection AI monitoring all customer interactions. Emergency escalation procedures for discrimination complaints. Jessica Morrison had been terminated as promised. Her final paycheck included a mandatory enrollment in a 40-hour bias awareness program that she would need to complete before seeking employment with any airline industry partner. The termination had been swift, documented, and legally airtight. Mark Thompson was halfway through his 30-day suspension, attending intensive unconscious bias, training 5 hours daily. His return to duty would require certification from 3 independent bias prevention experts and 6 months of probationary monitoring. David Rodriguez had been transferred to cargo operations, where his interaction with passengers was eliminated entirely. He was enrolled in a comprehensive sensitivity training program and would require annual recertification to maintain any customer-facing role in the future. Dr. Angela Foster, the newly appointed Executive Director of Inclusion and Bias Prevention, presented the initial results to the press conference. Her hiring had been one of Marcus's non-negotiable requirements, to a senior executive position dedicated entirely to preventing discrimination incidents. In 30 days, we've processed 1,247 employee training sessions, Dr. Foster announced. Our AI monitoring system has flagged and corrected 89 potential bias incidents before they escalated. Most importantly, we've received 0 discrimination complaints through our new reporting system. The $500,000 donation had been distributed among 5 civil rights organizations, with public announcements and transparent accounting. The NAACP, Southern Poverty Law Center, and 3 local civil rights groups had all acknowledged Meridian's commitment to systematic change rather than symbolic gestures. What surprised industry analysts was how quickly other airlines began implementing similar programs. Within 2 weeks of the Meridian incident, 7 major carriers had announced their own bias prevention initiatives. American Airlines, Respect and Dignity Training for All Staff. Delta, AI, Powered Customer Interaction Monitoring. United, Anonymous Discrimination Reporting Mobile App. Southwest, Unconscious Bias Certification Requirements. The Federal Aviation Administration had taken notice as well. Transportation Secretary Jennifer Wu announced new guidelines requiring bias prevention training for all airline customer service personnel, citing the Meridian incident as a catalyst for industry-wide reform. Marcus's prediction about stock price stabilization proved accurate. Within 24 hours of the public apology and reform announcement, Meridian Holdings had recovered 73% of its initial losses. Williams Industries stock had actually gained 1.2%, with investors viewing Marcus's handling of the crisis as evidence of strong leadership. The total cost of implementing the bias prevention program was $14.3 million, significantly less than the legal warfare option would have cost, and far less than the market cap losses from the first day of the incident. For Jessica Morrison, the consequences extended beyond employment termination. The viral nature of the incident meant that her actions were preserved permanently in social media history. Potential employers in any customer service industry could easily find footage of her discriminatory behavior. However, Marcus had insisted on one element of compassion in the settlement. Jessica would receive career counseling and bias training funding, with the possibility of a positive reference letter if she completed the full rehabilitation program successfully. Mark Thompson's suspension had initially felt like the end of his career, but the mandatory training had opened his eyes to unconscious biases he'd never recognized. In private conversations with colleagues, he'd admitted that the incident had forced him to confront assumptions he'd carried for decades. Rodriguez had found unexpected satisfaction in cargo operations, where the work was less stressful and the training he'd received had improved his relationships with co-workers from diverse backgrounds. In a follow-up interview with Harvard Business Review 3 weeks after the incident, Marcus reflected on his decision to pursue reform over revenge. Power isn't about punishment. It's about prevention. Destroying careers doesn't prevent the next incident. Changing systems does. We could have bankrupted individuals and damaged the company, but that wouldn't have helped the next black passenger who boards a plane. The interview had been viewed over 2 million times, with business schools already incorporating the case study into their ethics and leadership curricula. The true measure of success came in the data. Meridian's customer satisfaction scores among passengers of color had increased by 23% in just 6 weeks. Employee reporting of bias incidents had increased by 340%, indicating that staff felt safer addressing problems before they escalated. Other airlines using Meridian's AI monitoring system reported similar improvements, creating an industry-wide shift toward proactive bias prevention rather than reactive damage control. The transformation had been intellectual rather than punitive, systematic rather than symbolic, and permanent rather than performative. 6 months later, Marcus Williams walked through Gate 23 at the same terminal where his world had changed 6 months earlier. This time he was greeted by name, offered assistance, and treated with the dignity that should be extended to every passenger regardless of their appearance or perceived status. The transformation extended far beyond one airport or one airline. The Meridian model had become the gold standard for bias prevention in the transportation industry. 12 major airlines had adopted similar programs, and the Federal Transportation Authority had made bias training mandatory for all customer-facing airline personnel. Dr. Angela Foster's quarterly report showed remarkable progress. Discrimination incidents across the Meridian network had decreased by 89%. More importantly, customer satisfaction among passengers of all backgrounds had reached record highs. The investment in dignity had proven profitable in every measurable way. Jessica Morrison had completed her bias training program and found employment with a regional airline that specifically hired candidates who had undergone comprehensive anti-discrimination education. Her termination from Meridian had become a turning point rather than an ending. Mark Thompson had returned to work as a supervisor, but with a fundamentally different approach to customer service. His department now had the highest customer satisfaction ratings in the company, and he'd become an internal advocate for the bias prevention program. Sarah Chen, the travel blogger whose live stream had documented everything, had parlayed her viral moment into a career as a social justice advocate. Her follow-up content about systematic change versus cancel culture had been viewed over 15 million times. The incident had inspired changes beyond the airline industry. Hotels, restaurants, retail chains, and other service industries had begun implementing similar bias prevention programs. Harvard Business School had created an entire course around the case study, titled Using Corporate Power for Systematic Change. Marcus had been invited to speak at corporate leadership conferences around the world. His message was always the same. The most powerful response to discrimination isn't destruction, it's transformation. With the money saved by choosing reform over litigation, Marcus had established the Williams Foundation for Travel Equality. The foundation provided grants for bias prevention training, funded research into systematic discrimination, and offered legal support for passengers who experienced discrimination. The Foundation's first annual report showed that it had helped prevent over 400 potential discrimination incidents through early intervention and education programs. The story had become something larger than one man's experience on one flight. It had become proof that power could be used for construction rather than destruction, that systematic change was more valuable than personal revenge, and that data-driven solutions could solve problems that emotions alone could not. Today, millions of passengers fly with greater dignity because one man chose to use his power not to punish the past, but to prevent future incidents. Airport terminals across the country display placards about passenger rights and anti-discrimination policies, many directly inspired by the changes Marcus initiated. These touching stories remind us that real-life stories of discrimination still happen daily. But Black stories like Marcus's prove that life stories can create lasting change when power meets purpose, when intelligence meets opportunity, and when quiet strength meets loud injustice. The most profound transformations don't come from the loudest voices or the biggest lawsuits. They come from those patient enough, powerful enough, and wise enough to change systems rather than simply punish individuals. Marcus Williams didn't just buy a first-class seat that day. He purchased dignity for every person who would follow in his footsteps. Now it's your turn. Have you witnessed discrimination in travel, retail, or service industries? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story could inspire the next systematic change. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to see that power can be used for positive transformation rather than personal revenge. Subscribe for more stories of quiet power creating loud change, and hit the notification bell to join a community that believes in systematic solutions over symbolic gestures. What systematic changes would you implement if you had Marcus's power? Tell us in the comments. Together, we can ensure that dignity becomes the standard, not the exception.